execution and following its collapse. The Roman Empire was engulfed by the crisis of the 3rd century, a period of invasions, civil strife, economic disorder, and plague. 32. In defining historical epochs, this crisis is sometimes viewed as marking the transition from classical antiquity to late antiquity. Aurelian, R. 270-275, brought the empire back from the brink and stabilized it. Diocletian completed the work of fully restoring the empire, but declined the role of princeps and became the first emperor to be addressed regularly as Domin, Master or Lord. 33. Diocletian's reign also brought the empire's most concerted effort against the perceived threat of Christianity, the Great Persecution. Diocletian divided the empire into 4 regions, each ruled by a separate emperor, the Tetrarchy. 34. Confident that he fixed the disorders that were plaguing Rome, he abdicated along with his co-emperor, and the Tetrarchy soon collapsed. Order was eventually restored by Constantine the Great, who became the first emperor to convert to Christianity, and who established Constantinople as the new capital of the Eastern Empire. During the decades of the Constantinian and Valentinian dynasties, the empire was divided along an east-west axis, with dual power centers in Constantinople and Rome. The reign of Julian, under the influence of his advisor Mardonius, attempted to restore classical Roman and Hellenistic religion, only briefly interrupted the succession of Christian emperors. Theodosius I, the last emperor to rule over both East and West, died in 395 AD after making Christianity the official religion of the empire. 35. The Roman Empire by 476. Noting Western and Eastern divisions, the Western Roman Empire began to disintegrate in the early 5th century as Germanic migrations and invasions overwhelmed the capacity of the empire to assimilate the migrants and fight off the invaders. The Romans were successful in fighting off all invaders, most famously Attila. 36. Although the empire had assimilated so many Germanic peoples of dubious loyalty to Rome that the empire started to dismember itself. 37. Most chronologies place the end of Western Roman Empire in 476, when Romulus Augustulus was forced to abdicate to the Germanic warlord Odoacer. 38. 39, 40, by placing himself under the rule of the Eastern Emperor, rather than naming a puppet emperor of his own. Odoacer ended the Western Empire. He did this by declaring Zeno sole emperor, and placing himself as his nominal subordinate. In reality, Italy was now ruled by Odoacer alone. 38, 39, 41. The Eastern Roman Empire, also called the Byzantine Empire by later historians, continued to exist until the reign of Constantine XI Palaiologus. The last Roman emperor died in battle on the 29th of May, 1453 against Mehmed II the Conqueror and his Ottoman forces in the final stages of the siege of Constantinople. Mehmed I would himself also claim the title of Caesar or Caesar Iram in an attempt to claim a connection to the Roman Empire. 42. Geography and demography. The Roman Empire was one of the largest in history, with contiguous territories throughout Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. 43. The Latin phrase imperium sine fine, empire without end, 44, expressed ideology that neither time nor space limited the empire. In Virgil's epic poem the Aeneid, limitless empire is said to be granted to the Romans by their supreme deity Jupiter. 45. This claim of universal dominion was renewed and perpetuated when the empire came under Christian rule in the 4th century. In addition to annexing large regions in their quest for empire building, the Romans were also very large sculptors of their environment who directly altered their geography. For instance, entire forests were cut down to provide enough wood resources for an expanding empire. 47. the cities of the Roman world in the imperial period. 48. In reality, Roman expansion was mostly accomplished under the Republic, though parts of northern Europe were conquered in the 1st century AD, when Roman control in Europe, Africa, and Asia was strengthened. During the reign of Augustus, a global map of the known world was displayed for the first time in public at Rome, coinciding with the composition of the most comprehensive work on political geography that survives from antiquity, the geography of the Pontic Greek writer Strabo. 49. When Augustus did, the commemorative account of his achievements, Res Gesta, prominently featured the geographical cataloguing of peoples and places within the empire. 50. Geography, the census, and the meticulous keeping of written records were central concerns of Roman imperial administration. 51. A segment of the ruins of Hadrian's Wall in northern England, overlooking Craglock. The empire reached its largest expanse under Trajan, R98 117. 52, encompassing an area of 5 million square kilometers. 16. 17. The traditional population estimate of 55-60 million inhabitants, 53, accounted for between 1/6 and 1/4 of the world's total population, 54, and made it the largest population of any unified political entity in the West until the mid-19th century. 55. Recent demographic studies have argued for a population peak ranging from 70 million to more than 100 million. 56. Each of the three largest cities in the empire, Rome, Alexandria, and Antioch, was almost twice the size of any European city at the beginning of the 17th century. 57. As the historian Christopher Kelly has described it, then the empire stretched from Hadrian's Wall in drizzle-soaked northern England to the sun-baked banks of the Euphrates in Syria, from the great Rhine-Danube river system, which snaked across the fertile, flat lands of Europe from the Low Countries to the Black Sea, to the rich plains of the North African coast and the luxuriant gash of the Nile Valley in Egypt. The empire completely circled the Mediterranean, referred to by its conquerors as Mare Nostrum Mausi. 53. Trajan's successor Hadrian adopted a policy of maintaining rather than expanding the empire. Borders, fines, were marked, and the frontiers, limits, patrolled. 52. The most heavily fortified borders were the most unstable. 23. Hadrian's Wall, which separated the Roman world from what was perceived as an ever-present barbarian threat, is the primary surviving monument of this effort. 58. Languages. The language of the Romans was Latin, which Virgil emphasized as a source of Roman unity and tradition. 59. Until the time of Alexander Severus, R 222-235. The birth certificates and wills of Roman citizens had to be written in Latin. 60. Latin was the language of the law courts in the West and of the military throughout the empire. 61. But was not imposed officially on peoples brought under Roman rule. 62. This policy contrasts with that of Alexander the Great, who aimed to impose Greek throughout his empire as the official language. 63. As a consequence of Alexander's conquests, Koine Greek had become shared language around the eastern Mediterranean and into Asia Minor. 64. The linguistic frontier dividing the Latin West and the Greek East passed through the Balkan Peninsula. 65. A 5th century papyrus showing a parallel Latin-Greek text of a speech by Cicero. 66. Romans who received an elite education studied Greek as a literary language, and most men of the governing classes could speak Greek. 67. The Julio-Claudian emperors encouraged high standards of correct Latin, Latinitas, a linguistic movement identified in modern terms as classical Latin, and favored Latin for conducting official business. 68. Claudius tried to limit the use of Greek, and on occasion revoked the citizenship of those who lacked Latin. but even in the Senate he drew on his own bilingualism in communicating with Greek-speaking ambassadors. 68. Suetonius quotes him as referring to our two languages. 69. In the Eastern Empire, laws and official documents were regularly translated into Greek from Latin. 70. The everyday interpenetration of the two languages is indicated by bilingual inscriptions, which sometimes even switch back and forth between Greek and Latin. 71. After all freeborn inhabitants of the empire were universally enfranchised in 212 AD, a great number of Roman citizens would have lacked Latin, though Latin remained a marker of Romanness. 72. Among other reforms, the Emperor Diocletian, R. 284-305, sought to renew the authority of Latin, and the Greek expression H. Kratos a dialectos attests to the continuing status of Latin as the language of power. 73. In the early 6th century, the Emperor Justinian engaged in a quixotic effort to reassert the status of Latin as the language of law, even though in his time Latin no longer held any currency as a living language in the East. 74. Local languages and linguistic legacy. References to interpreters indicate the continuing use of local languages other than Greek and Latin, particularly in Egypt, where Coptic predominated, and in military settings along the Rhine and Danube. Roman jurists also show a concern for local languages such as Punic, Gaulish, and Aramaic in assuring the correct understanding and application of laws and oaths. 75. In the province of Africa, Libyco-Berber and Punic were used in inscriptions and for legends on coins during the time of Tiberius. 1st century AD. Bilingual Latin Punic inscription at Theatre in Leptis Magna, Roman Africa, present-day Libya. Libyco-Berber and Punic inscriptions appear on public buildings into the 2nd century, some bilingual with Latin. 76. In Syria, Palmyrene soldiers even used their dialect of Aramaic for inscriptions, in a striking exception to the rule that Latin was the language of the military. 77. The Babatha archive is a suggestive example of multilingualism in the empire. These papyri, named for a Jewish woman in the province of Arabia and dating from 93 to 132 AD, mostly employ Aramaic, the local language, written in Greek characters with Semitic and Latin influences. A petition to the Roman governor, however, was written in Greek. 78. The dominance of Latin among the literate elite may obscure the continuity of spoken languages, since all cultures within the Roman Empire were predominantly oral. 76. In the West, Latin, referred to in its spoken form as Vulgar Latin, gradually replaced Celtic and Italic languages that were related to it by a shared Indo-European origin. Commonalities in syntax and vocabulary facilitated the adoption of Latin. 79. 80. After the decentralization of political power in late antiquity, Latin developed locally into branches that became the Romance languages, such as Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, Catalan and Romanian, and a large number of minor languages and dialects. Today, more than 900 million people are native speakers worldwide. 81. As an international language of learning and literature, Latin itself continued as an active medium of expression for diplomacy and for intellectual developments identified with Renaissance humanism up to the 17th century, and for law and the Roman Catholic Church to the present. 82. Gate of Domitian and Trajan at the northern entrance of the Temple of Athor, and Roman Emperor Domitian as Pharaoh of Egypt on the same gate, together with Egyptian hieroglyphs. Dendra, Egypt. 83. Although Greek continued as the language of the Byzantine Empire, linguistic distribution in the East was more complex. A Greek-speaking majority lived in the Greek peninsula and islands, Western Anatolia major cities, and some coastal areas. 84. Like Greek and Latin, the Thracian language was of Indo-European origin, as were several now extinct languages in Anatolia attested by imperial era inscriptions. 8476. Albanian is often seen as the descendant of Illyrian, although this hypothesis has been challenged by some linguists, who maintain that it derives from Dacian or Thracian. 85. Illyrian, Dacian and Thracian, however, may have formed a subgroup or a spragbund, see Thraco-Illyrian. Various Afroasiatic languages, primarily Coptic in Egypt, and Aramaic in Syria and Mesopotamia, were never replaced by Greek. The international use of Greek, however, was one factor enabling the spread of Christianity, as indicated for example by the use of Greek for the epistles of Paul. 84. Several references to Gaulish in late antiquity may indicate that it continued to be spoken. In the 2nd century AD there was an explicit recognition of its usage in some legal manners. 86. Soothsaying. 87. And pharmacology. 88. Sulpicius Severus, writing in the 5th century AD in Gallia Aquitania, noted bilingualism with Gaulish as the first language. 87. The survival of the Galatian dialect in Anatolia akin to that spoken both very near Trier was attested by Jerome, 331-420, who had first-hand knowledge. 89. Much of historical linguistics scholarship postulates that Gaulish was indeed still spoken as late as the mid to late 6th century in France. 90. Despite considerable Romanization of the local material culture, the Gaulish language is held to have survived and had coexisted with spoken Latin during the centuries of Roman rule of Gaul. 90. The last reference to Galatian was made by Cyril of Scythopolis, claiming that an evil spirit had possessed a monk and rendered him able to speak only in Galatian, while the last reference to Gaulish in France was made by Gregory of Tours between 560 and 575, noting that a shrine in Orphanuhic is called Vaso Galatii in the Gallic tongue was destroyed and burned to the ground. 92. 90. After the long period of bilingualism, the emergent Gallo-Romance languages including French were shaped by Gaulish in a number of ways. In the case of French these include loanwords and calques, including OUI. 93. The word for yes. 94. 93. Sound changes. 95. And influences in conjugation and word order. 94. 93. 96. Proto-Basque language or Aquitanian survived the Roman conquest, and evolved with Latin loans to present-day Basque language. 97. Recent discoveries as the hand of Iruligi shows that this language was also written during the Roman conquest. 98. But only proper names are known from the Roman Empire. Timbs. Society. A multi-generational banquet depicted on a wall painting from Pompeii, 1st century AD. The Roman Empire was remarkably multicultural, with a rather astonishing cohesive capacity to create a sense of shared identity while encompassing diverse peoples within its political system over a long span of time. 99. The Roman attention to creating public monuments and communal spaces open to all such as forums, amphitheaters, racetracks and baths helped foster a sense of Romanness. 100. Roman society had multiple, overlapping social hierarchies that modern concepts of class in English may not represent accurately. 101. The 2 decades of civil war from which Augustus rose to sole power left traditional society in Rome in a state of confusion and upheaval. 102. But did not effect an immediate distribution of wealth and social power. From the perspective of lower classes, a peak was merely added to the social pyramid. 103. Personal relationships, patronage, friendship, amictia, family, marriage continued to influence the workings of politics and government, as they had in the Republic. 104. By the time of Nero, however, it was not unusual to find a former slave who was richer than a freeborn citizen, or an equestrian who exercised greater power than a senator. 105. The blurring or diffusion of the republic's more rigid hierarchies led to increased social